You're watching Testimony, Profiles in Faith.
A blanket of fear was being laid down by one individual. Son of Sam was taunting the police.
I was just afraid, and all of my friends were afraid.
In the big bag city of New York, this is a major thing that's going on.
It was so out there, it was so heinous at the time.
Affected really the whole metropolitan area.
You wouldn't want to be outside, especially at night.
When the sun would begin to go down, something would grip me. The Son of Sam is out there.
That was just unreal how one person had that much control.
No one knew when he was going to strike.
It was just something that was just pure evil.
About 10 million people were being just terrorized.
I was born in 1953 in Brooklyn, New York, and taken right home to the Bronx. I was adopted right at birth by Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz, and I lived in the Soundview section of the Bronx. We lived in a small apartment in a six-story tenement building. Around the age of 5, I began to experience a lot of emotional problems and inner struggles. I began to have various emotional and psychological problems. I was not behaving, not growing up as a normal child. There was this dark, evil, satanic pull in my life, even since I was a child. As I got older, I began to run the streets, hanging out with some of the older teenagers. I felt these urges to jump in front of cars or to jump off a walk bridge. Now, what normal child would have these kind of desires, these self-destructive things? And now I learned that this was demonic, that I was demon-possessed. And I believe that with all my heart. After my mom had passed on, my dad and I moved to another part of the Bronx, which was like in a better neighborhood, because the neighborhood where I grew up in was very, very bad. I mean, people were shooting heroin on the rooftop. There was all kinds of crime in that neighborhood. So it was my dad's desire to bring me up in a better neighborhood. It was really good for my dad, but me, you know, I just still didn't fit in, even though I moved to the other neighborhood and met some friends and things. I felt aimless. I felt I had no purpose. I was getting ready to graduate high school in 1971, so I decided to join the Army. I ended up going to Korea, and it turned out to be a big disappointment because it wasn't like what I thought it would be. I got out in '74 and came back to the Bronx, still feeling aimless, you know, just searching for something. I was lonely, and I was 21 years old. I was hoping to maybe find a girlfriend, start a life, get married, just basic stuff, you know? And it just never worked out that way. I met some guys at a party on the block on Barnes Avenue. Well, they seemed like nice people, but they were into some kinky stuff with witchcraft and so forth. So I began to drift into that and hang out in the park with them. And it didn't seem to be anything bad or evil. It all seemed kind of normal. I didn't see any danger in that. One thing led to another, and I found this satanic thing to be pretty interesting, you know. In fact, it was almost like spooky and adventurous. I always felt drawn to that anyways. I said, wow, this is really neat. This is really interesting. So I always wanted something to commit my life to.
I think one has to understand the life that David had prior to his involvement in Satanism. Basically, he was a loner, didn't have too many friends, kept to himself, began to dabble in the occult.
I began to go a little deeper. I went out and purchased a satanic Bible. I didn't even know there was such a thing, but someone says, you got to get this, you know, this Bible. You know, this will help you. This will give you, you know, the power that you want, the control over life that you want. It's cool. It's okay. You know, there's good stuff in there.
I think that there was a spiritual voidedness in his heart, and Satan systematically came into his heart and filled whatever gap David had. It's something that is transitional. It goes from one step to the next.
I felt that I was somehow ready to go through like a go to another level where I asked the devil to come into my life and take over, and I surrendered myself to this being that in my twisted thinking, I thought was somehow going to be my friend or something.
A pact with the devil basically means, and many people do it this way, they take a piece of paper or parchment paper, they literally write either in black or red ink or in human blood a contract with the devil. What basically that means is that Satan will completely take over their lives, their thinking, the way they act, the way they behave, everything. You make a contract with the devil and ultimately you commit murders.
Under some of the literature that I had read, Satan and Jesus were working together for the same goal. While Satan's job was to destroy, the ultimate aim was to bring about God's kingdom. That in the end, the devil and Jesus will be reunited and become friends. Like they're working on, in other words, on the same team, but with different ways.
I remember specifically reading letters that he had sent to the police. And I remember the fear that it created in my own heart.
I actually believed this in my mind. I become convinced over time that my job was to be a soldier for the devil and to bring destruction.
It caused me to step back, but even as a prison guard, and say, boy, this guy must be really, really, really either sick or something, that he's taunting them.
Ultimately, that good would become of it, that it will help bring about the apocalypse, the end of the world, so that God could establish his kingdom of peace. That made sense to me back then.
I remember my initial feeling of just a tremendous hatred by all police officers for him, and I myself was very cocky as a police officer and always said, I'll be the one to catch him.
Today I could slap myself in the face for believing something so stupid, but actually believe that with all my heart. That the bad things that were being done were actually going to be good. But it was just a trick of the enemy.
I remember we used to get the newspaper and we would say, it's happened again. I think the whole nation was mesmerized by this.
I know I was in a lot of torment. Well, people can't understand that. They're not in my shoes. But I was a very tormented person. I was not happy. I was not receiving any joy over the things that were happening.
Everybody, I think, in the country was kind of wondering, you know, could that thing happen here?
I wanted out of that so I couldn't wait, in a sense, to finally get it over with. And I remember when I was arrested and the cops surrounded me with guns pointed in every direction as I sat in my car in front of that apartment building on Pine Street. They took me out of the car, and one of the officers, he said to me, are you glad this is over? And I looked at him and I said, yeah, I'm very glad. And they were all like taken aback that I was almost happy. I was thankful.
Every newspaper, every television station was on it, and I remember looking when they brought him out, and I remember they had his hands behind his back, and to look at it, and I looked and I saw evil, just evil. In fact, I remember one particular frame of a picture. He had a smirk on his face.
Coming up, hear how David's sinister behavior even frightens the prison guards.
Of all the inmates that I ever dealt with, he was spiritually the most tormented, and it actually scared me.
And later, see how only God could break the chokehold of evil on David's life.
I felt this urge to get down on my knees in the darkness of the cell, and I began to pour out my heart to the Lord.
When Testimony, Profiles in Faith continues.